It's great to be here with you, and I'm really excited for the time we're going to spend together. I just have a few things I want to share with you before we start. First thing is Wassim, my name. In case any of you forgets it, it's really easy to remember, right? It means handsome. Okay? Did you guys know that? Okay, so Wassim means handsome. Some people just guess my name, just walking down the street. They're like, you must be Wassim. No, actually, I don't actually believe that. I think my parents took a huge risk in naming me Wassim, because as a baby, I'm not sure I was that handsome. And how did you know? It would be really weird me walking around with a name that meant handsome if I weren't. And until today, I'm not really sure that it really panned out. Anyway, like Chris was saying, we are here because we want to be able to serve you guys. We want to be able to answer some of your questions. If you guys have questions, things you're struggling with, we're happy to spend time with you and talk with you. So please come, seek us out, come ask us questions that you have. There is no question that is off limits. We are happy to get all your questions. I can't promise you that I will have an answer to every single question you have, but at least I might be able to help you think about your question deeper, maybe point you to some resources, and maybe if you have some questions that I do have some answers for, I would be able to help you with that. Another thing you should know about me is that I'm really in philosophy. So I teach philosophy at university. And this will reflect itself somehow in the lectures that I'm going to give. So I don't know how you guys feel about philosophy. I know there are a lot of people who are not really excited about it. I think philosophy is amazing, and I think it's really helped me. Actually, it's really helped me with my faith. So I'm hoping that that will come across a little bit as well. And if there's something you don't understand, I will try to... let me just say it this way. I'll try to give you kind of where I'm going right at the beginning of the lecture so you guys know where we're headed. So if any part of it just kind of drops in the middle, you can still be following. Okay, so today I'm talking to you about the problem of doubt. And okay, here's where I'm going with this lecture. Okay, so here's where I'm going. Doubt is not something to be proud of, nor is it something to be ashamed of, or feel guilty for. It is something to be taken seriously and dealt with. Okay? So you shouldn't feel guilty if you are doubting. You shouldn't be ashamed if you are doubting. Neither should you be really proud if you are doubting. It's neither something to be really proud of nor something to be ashamed of. It is something that needs to be taken seriously. So this idea is talked about by Os Guinness. Os Guinness is a sociologist who's written a book on doubt. He's a Christian sociologist. He's written a really good book on doubt if you're looking him up a little bit more. He's going to come up again in this. Why is it that some people are afraid of doubt? Or why is it that people feel guilty or ashamed when they doubt? Now I want to make a couple of suggestions why that is the case. Maybe it's because sometimes some people, especially if I've grown up in a very Christian community, if I've grown up in church, we have this idea that I'm afraid of God's reaction if I lose my faith. And if you lose your faith, you're going to be in trouble with God, right? You might end up in hell, for example, if you start asking difficult questions, or if you start thinking about things deeply, or start thinking about things in ways where we don't have very clear-cut answers. Doubt is risky. It's scary. Be careful. If you start on the road to doubt, that's dangerous. And maybe that's one of the reasons some of us, when we start feeling some doubts, we want to push them away. We want to silence our doubts. We want to avoid them. Or we feel like we can't talk about this with anyone else, right? We feel guilty. We feel ashamed. I shouldn't be doubting God, but somehow it's difficult to push doubts away. When doubts are sincere, when doubts are really there, it's really hard to just say, well, we'll act as if they are not there. Now, another reason is sometimes we fear what we might lose or whom we might lose because we are losing our faith. Especially, again, if you live in a community where faith is something that's really important. You might be really worried that if I voice my questions, if I voice my concerns, if I voice the issues that I'm having problems with, I might be alienated from this group. They might not think of me as spiritual enough, or not think of me as really truly Christian in some sense. And that could mean I will not be able to belong to this group that's really important to me. And that's another reason I think we push our doubts away. Now, I want to suggest that these are not good reasons to push your doubts away. They're not good reasons for you to suppress the doubts that you have. In fact, I want to suggest that we believe in a God, I believe in a God who is big enough for me to voice my doubts, to voice my questions, to talk about my concerns, to struggle out loud, to struggle with Him. You know what? I think that sometimes struggling with God means you love Him. If you didn't love Him, you wouldn't struggle with Him. Sometimes when people are really struggling with their faith, one of the things I want to tell them is fight with God. You read a book like the book of Job, and Job is struggling and fighting with God throughout the book. He's not being very nice. There are some things that Job says in the book of Job that if it were said today in a church, there's a high probability he would not be allowed back in. Right? I think God is big enough for you to voice your doubts, to voice your questions, right? And I think for some of us, that might be the only way I am capable of loving God in the time that I'm in right now. Struggling with God, fighting with God means you're still holding on to Him in some sense. He's still important to you. And as a community, we are not supposed to be a place where people are afraid of voicing their doubts. Because what kind of community appreciates conformity over authenticity? That would be a community I'm not really sure I would be very happy to be part of, right? What kind of God would appreciate conformity over authenticity? What kind of God would be angry at me if I had questions about Him, sincere questions about Him, and He's not taking me seriously? And He would rather me stop asking questions and just get in line. I'm not sure that would be a God that is really worth worshiping, worth following at all. And so my suggestion is, God appreciates your questions and your doubts. And church should appreciate your questions and your doubts. Should it be a safe place for you to voice these questions, for you to ask the questions that you have, for you to share your doubts and struggle with them, as long as you're doing it sincerely. Because there is a phenomena where people are proud of their doubt, right? There is a form of what we call skepticism that doubts for doubt's sake. Doubt is not a way to pursue deeper truth or to understand things, but it is a way to reject things. And doubt becomes a skill that I have rather than one of the faculties, one of the tools that I have in order to reach truth. And I'll talk more about what that means and what that is like. So what is doubt exactly? The way Os Guinness defines it in his book is, contrary to widespread misunderstanding, doubt is not the same as unbelief. So it is not the opposite of faith. Rather, it is a state of mind in suspension between faith and unbelief. Okay, so think about this. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. In fact, in order for you to doubt, you have to have faith. If you do not have faith, you cannot doubt. Because doubt is this space of tension, right? You're struggling because there's something that is in some sense important to you. There's something that is in some sense valuable that you are questioning, but it's still valuable. So there is this connection to this thing that you are doubting. If you lose the connection to the thing you are doubting, all of a sudden it ceases to be doubt and it becomes unbelief. So the state of doubt, the state where you are in this tension, is the state where you have faith, but something is pulling you towards unbelief. So you're being pulled from two sides. Only when you're being pulled from both sides can you say that what you're struggling with is doubt. And that is a legitimate struggle to have. So having doubt does not mean you do not have faith. To the contrary, having doubt means there is faith that you're struggling with. And that is a good thing. That's an encouraging thing to start with. Now, I want to go back and think a little bit about some of the, philosophical grounding for some of the ideas we have about doubt and faith. And I want to think with you about why it is that we have some of the attitudes we have about faith and doubt that we do have today. Okay? So, one big thing that I see in the world today is what I would call the search for certainty. It's not just me who calls it that. A lot of people call it that, but we have this longing, the search for what we call certainty. What is certainty? Certainty is a faith or a position or a system of beliefs that is impossible to doubt, right? I remember growing up and starting to have some questions about my faith, and I came across this author called C.S. Lewis. I'm not sure how many of you have started to read C.S. Lewis, but I remember coming across C.S. Lewis and it was like, wow, I did not know this existed, right? I did not know there were people who really thought about the faith in that way and are able to explain it and are able to answer my questions. If you haven't read C.S. Lewis yet, I encourage you, please do. I mean, just put it on the top of your list. Start maybe by Mere Christianity or The Problem of Pain. Amazing books. If you're not into that kind of writing, read Till We Have Faces. Amazing. He writes fiction as well, but really deep fiction. So C.S. Lewis, put him on your list, okay? And I remember thinking, if I memorized C.S. Lewis's work, there would be no question on earth that anyone could ask me that I wouldn't be able to answer. I was so impressed with the way he was explaining things that I thought, this is exactly what I need, and this is exactly what I need to have in my memory, so nobody can ask me a question that I can't answer. Now, what I found out soon enough is that C.S. Lewis doesn't answer all questions, and there are a lot of people who disagree with C.S. Lewis, and when I read some of their disagreements with C.S. Lewis, some of them made sense, and I was like, uh-oh, this is really problematic. You see, I want to be in this position where my faith is so secure that I have an answer to every single question, that there is no objection, there is no point of weakness in my faith. I have the place of certainty. And I think we want this place of certainty. It feels safe to be certain, right? It's comfortable to be certain. It can also make me a little bit arrogant to be certain sometimes. It can also make me feel I am better than other people because they don't believe what I believe just because they don't have the data that I have. They haven't done the research that I've done or things like that. But I think it's human in some sense for us to have this longing for certainty. Now, I think there are problems with this longing for certainty, this idea of I want a faith that cannot be doubted. But I think this comes from a way of thinking about faith and knowledge, very pervasive in the world. Now, what I'm going to suggest right now is the way I think a lot of people think about faith and knowledge. This is the common conception, and I don't agree with it, okay? I'm saying this because I remember giving this lecture in a place, and then somebody liked the slide, and they took a picture, and they posted it in social media as if this was my position, my opinion, and they were like, this is really amazing stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad you like it. I don't agree, right? And so I'm just having this said from early on. This is the common conception of faith, and I don't agree with it. But this is the conception. It goes something like this. There is something called knowledge, and knowledge is beliefs that you have, and they are certain. We use the word facts, right? They are indubitable. You know what that means, right? Indubitable. Let's memorize that. Let's make it the word of the day, right? Indubitable. It means it is impossible to doubt it, okay? It's when you say something that is indubitable, no one can doubt it. It cannot be doubted. No one even has the capacity to doubt something that is indubitable. And that's what we want. We want a system of beliefs that is indubitable, and the beliefs themselves have to be completely trustworthy. Okay? And we call that, people think of that as knowledge. So think about it this way. When people talk about science, right? People usually say something like, this is fact, right? And one of the things they mean is, if you doubt this, you're ridiculous. If you don't believe this is, they will use the term objective, right? It's not like faith. Because what is faith? These are beliefs that can be doubted. They're not indubitable. And they are subjective. This is what is true for you, right? Think of the way we separate science from faith, right? Science is objective, works for everyone. I'm allowed to tell you you're wrong if you think something that is opposed to the contemporary view of science or the contemporary position that science holds. But when it comes to faith, that's something personal. It's something private. It's something yours. You think about that. You want to talk about it? I'm not really sure we're very comfortable with that, but we'll let you talk about it. But in the end, it's yours. It's subjective. It's not objective. And it's not really trustworthy, right? It's just your thing that helps you along the way, right? And this way of thinking is just so pervasive. Any sitcom you will watch will have that. If you watch The Big Bang Theory, for example, right? It just goes, you watch Friends, you will have this kind of dichotomy, right? Between any person who makes this claim that would fall under the category of faith, that's personal, that's yours, that's cute, that's nice, you can, keep it to yourself. any person who talks about knowledge, talks about science, talks about fact, and science doesn't always mean just natural sciences, but any of the sciences in general. Sometimes people will incorporate things like the humanities in some of that, but not always, right? Okay, so this is a common way of thinking about knowledge and faith. And we accept that way because it's kind of the water we drink, right? It's the way we've grown up to think about things. And I want to suggest that this is not necessarily the best way to think of these two terms. But this way of thinking has its roots in this handsome man. Right? I think all philosophers are handsome. I don't know why, but yeah. So this man is called René Descartes. I'm not sure you've heard of him before. He's really famous. If you've done any philosophy, you've probably come across René Descartes. And he is a very influential French philosopher. He's written a really small book called Meditations on First Philosophy, and it's a group of meditations. And I just want to read with you his starting words, right? The words in the first couple of pages from his meditations. He says this. He says, "Some years ago, I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole evidence I had subsequently based on them. I realized that it was necessary once in the course of my life to demolish everything completely and start again right from the foundation. Wanted to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last." Okay, so what is he saying? Just in simpler words, he's saying, when I was young, I was told so many things, right? And I believed so many things that I was told. And as I grew up, I found that some of the things that I was told were not true. Well, how do I know that there are not other things that I was told growing up that are also not true? So what is the solution to this problem? I want to have a system of beliefs that is factual, that is reliable, that is, and he uses this word, indubitable, right? I want to have that system of beliefs. So what can I do to get that system of beliefs? So in order to do that, I can't rely on the things that I learned when I was young growing up and didn't know better. I have to demolish everything, destroy all my beliefs, put all my beliefs aside, think of all my beliefs as false, and build up my knowledge system from the ground up once more. And then he goes on to say this, "But to accomplish this, it will not be necessary for me to show that all my opinions are false, which is something I could perhaps never manage. Reason now leads me to think that I should hold back my assent from opinions which are not completely certain and indubitable, just as carefully as I do from those which are patently false. So, for the purpose of rejecting all my opinions, it will be enough if I find in each of them at least some reason for doubt." Now, here's the point he's making. He's saying, look, I am going to evaluate my beliefs once more. And if any of my beliefs can be doubted, I want a system of beliefs that cannot be doubted. I want it to be indubitable. So if it's possible to doubt something, I will treat it as if it were false until I find a foundation that is impossible to doubt, that no one can doubt. It is just completely obviously true. There's no one in the whole world that can tell me I am wrong in what I am doubting. Now, if you start reading the book, it's really annoying because he starts doubting literally everything. It's called a Cartesian radical doubt, right? Have you heard the term Cartesian before? It comes from Descartes. He was also a mathematician, by the way. And so what Descartes does is he starts doubting every single thing in order to build a system of thought and belief that is indubitable, right? No one can doubt it. So what he starts doing is he's saying, okay, do I believe what my senses tell me? And then he says, well, wait a minute. Sometimes I think I saw something when I didn't see it. Or sometimes I think I heard something when I didn't hear it. Now, how do I know that the things I see now are not things that I will later realize that are not really there? Have you guys seen The Matrix, the movie? It's a little bit older movie, okay? Have you seen The Truman Show? Right? Have you seen Inception? Okay? Any of these movies? They play with this idea of how do we know what is actually real? Right? And this comes from this way of thinking. What Descartes was saying, he said at some point, well, look, sometimes I'm dreaming and I'm seeing things. I'm seeing tables and chairs and people, and I think they're real, but it turns out I'm dreaming. So how can I be sure that I'm not dreaming right now? Well, it's impossible to be 100% sure that you're not dreaming right now. There's this Eastern thinker, philosopher, I don't remember his name, but he had this idea. One day he dreams that he is a butterfly, right? And he wakes up from his dream and asks himself, how do I know that I am not a butterfly that is dreaming to be a human? Right? Now, you might think this is ridiculous, but philosophically speaking, there is no way to be 100% sure that you are not a butterfly that is dreaming to be human. Really, I mean, this is just, I mean, is it possible? I mean, it is, right? Sometimes you dream that you are someone else or that you are in someplace else that you are not, and you wake up, right? How do you know that this is not a dream that you are in right now? Now, what Descartes does is he just basically said that every single thing that we think of as real and true can be doubted. Except one thing. There's only one thing that is impossible to doubt, right? So he subjects everything to doubt and rejects anything that can be doubted, and he realizes that there's one thing that can be doubted. And that one thing is summed up in a Latin phrase, and this is a great way to show off if you want to kind of show off in front of other people. Memorize things in Latin or Greek. It makes people think you're much smarter than you actually are, so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I want you guys to think that I'm much smarter than I actually am. He says, cogito ergo sum. Cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. Okay? I think, therefore I am. What does this mean? He basically says, I can never doubt that I am doubting. It's impossible. Because if I doubt that I am doubting, in doubting that I am doubting, I am actually doubting. Right? It's impossible. If I start doubting my doubt, in doubting my doubt, I'm actually doubting. And I know that doubt is a form of thinking. So, I cannot doubt that I am thinking, because if I doubt that I am thinking, I'm also thinking, right? And therefore, given that I am thinking, there must be an I, a subject that is doing the thinking. So if I am thinking, that means I exist. I think, therefore I am. So the one thing Descartes cannot doubt is that he exists as a thinking being, right? Now he goes on in his meditations to bring back everything else. He says, I'm going to use that as my foundation. I think, therefore I am, is my foundation. And I'm going to build up from this foundation every other thing in a way that is a system indubitable. He brings back the existence of God. He brings back the existence of other people. He brings back, what we can trust in our senses. He brings back mathematics. Imagine he doubted mathematics. He doubted that mathematics is actually, he said it is possible to doubt mathematics. It's a really weird argument where he says, what if we were actually created by an evil demon who created us to think that 2 + 2 = 4 when 2 + 2 does not equal 4? Isn't that possible? Right? And he says, it is even possible to doubt that 2 + 2 = 4. Right? This is a really well-respected philosopher. This is not someone who's taken lightly in the philosophical world, okay? But anyway, he builds this whole system of belief, and he thinks that this system of beliefs is now indubitable, right? Actually, a lot of people think that he was a believer. He was someone who was not trying to demolish faith in any way. He was actually trying to build a system of belief that includes God, that is indubitable, that skeptics, that people who are doubting cannot reject, okay? Now, a lot of philosophers since Descartes have argued that Descartes wasn't really successful in building his indubitable system. That even I think, therefore I am can actually be doubted. Some philosophers have thought that this actually doesn't work, that his whole endeavor, his whole method doesn't work. And we might come to that in a second. But there's one thing that Descartes did that I think still lives with us today. It is this idea that we want systems of beliefs that are indubitable. And that if something can be doubted, I should treat it as if it were false. If something can be doubted, I should treat it as if it were false. Now, if we must reject all that can be doubted, I think we're going to be in a specific kind of dilemma, right? This dilemma is we are going to be either on one side where we say, okay, if I must reject everything that can be doubted, I will try to build a system of faith that is indubitable. I'm going to do like I was trying to do, to memorize C.S. Lewis's books and have arguments for everything and just show that there is no one that can prove me wrong. It is impossible for me to be wrong. But you know what happens then if it turns out that any part can be doubted in my system? So I find out that there are actually people who disagree with C.S. Lewis and who have good arguments for their disagreements. So something can be doubted. My whole system will fall. Because we want a level of certainty. If we think we have that level of certainty and then someone shows us that we don't actually have that level of certainty, what happens is our whole system of faith collapses. Someone just points out that there's a verse that is contradicting with another verse in the Bible, and we're like, oh no, this means that Christianity is not true. I mean, it doesn't, but we think that the whole system has to be so robust that there is nothing that we cannot answer. And if it turns out that there is something that we cannot answer, our whole system ends up collapsing. The other extreme we would go to is, well, okay, let's say there is no indubitable system of faith. If everything can be doubted, like Descartes showed, then maybe all beliefs are equal, since all of them can be doubted. And if all beliefs are equal, it doesn't matter what you believe, since we cannot know truth. Because in our minds, to know truth means to have a system of faith that is indubitable. Now again, this is the problem, right? The problem is if you are seeking certainty, if you want a system that is indubitable, you will either want to build a system that is indubitable, or you will think that all systems are equally doubtful and therefore all kind of the same. And it leads to a kind of relativism that you find yourself in. Now, here's what I think a lot of apologetics sometimes tries to do. It accepts this dichotomy of knowledge and faith, but it tries to argue that our faith is a knowledge. Okay? So it says, look, my faith is something that I can prove with reason. So I want to take it out of this realm of subjective beliefs, remember the old kind of separation that I had, and put it here, in this realm of objective beliefs, of knowledge, right? This is what I want to reach in the end. Here's the problem with this. So the idea that I must reject all that can be doubted provides me with an easy way to reject any idea that I do not want to accept. Let me explain what I mean by this. Have you ever watched debates, especially kind of debates with atheists and Christians, or Christians and people from other religions, right? Something really interesting happens. You'll get someone, for example, debating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He'll come up and he'll make this strong historical case that the resurrection of Jesus Christ, there's a lot of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? It's a historical case. And then the opposing side will come up and say, but it is possible, right? It is possible that you're wrong about this or this or this. And by doing that, realize what he's doing. He says, so for example, especially with the resurrection, it's really interesting for me. They say, well, couldn't it be possible that the disciples stole the body? I mean, you would say something like, it's very unlikely. We don't have evidence that that happened. He says, yeah, but is it not possible? Is it not possible? There was someone who claimed at some point that Jesus had an identical twin. This is a real argument that someone's made, right? Jesus had an identical twin, and when Jesus died, his identical twin shows up. It was even made into a movie using this idea. It's called The Prestige, if anybody of you have watched it. And this idea that, isn't that possible? It's possible. Jesus had an identical twin, and when he came back, people thought Jesus was raised from the dead. Now, is there evidence for these claims? No, there's no evidence, but are they possible? Yeah, it's possible. And it says here, well, given that it's possible, it means that you haven't given me something that is indubitable. They don't use these words, but you haven't given me something that I cannot doubt. It is possible for me to doubt it, and therefore, I can reject it. Think about it this way. The bar we have for accepting things we want to accept is rather low. But the bar we have for rejecting things we want to reject is really high, right? So for accepting things we want to reject. If I need to accept something that I don't like, my bar is going to be really high. It has to be indubitable. But if it's something that I want to accept, I only need it to be possibly true, and I'll accept it, right? And I want to suggest that this system is not a good system. It's not a good way to think about things about faith. It's not a good way to think about life in general. And I want to show you why that is. So this is a theologian. His name is Leslie Newbigin. So I'm going to start giving answers, right? I'm going to try to give some solutions, okay? So Leslie Newbigin, really, really great theologian. Really recommend his work. A little bit dense, but really profound stuff, right? He has a book called Proper Confidence. A lot of the ideas of this lecture were taken from that book, okay? So in his book, Proper Confidence, one of the criticisms he raises, and he takes it from another philosopher called Wittgenstein, who's really difficult to read. So Leslie Newbigin is a much easier read than Wittgenstein. Okay, but he says, look, there's a problem with Descartes' method because all doubt is based on belief. In order to doubt anything, it has to be because you believe other things. Now think about this. If I tell you, I have doubts about X, whatever issue, right? I have doubts about your sincerity. I have doubts about your financial condition. I have doubts, whatever it is that I have doubts about. You are justified asking a very simple question. The question is, why? What are the reasons you have for doubting X? And you expect me to give you a list of reasons that I believe, right? If I doubt that you all are sitting here, you can ask me, well, why are you doubting that we're all sitting here? And if I give you just a group of ridiculous reasons, you are going to dismiss my doubt totally. If I tell you that I am doubting that I am actually a butterfly, you might ask me, well, what makes you think you're a butterfly? And if I just tell you that, well, I dreamt one day that I was a butterfly and I thought maybe that's real, you might be legitimized by telling me that's a ridiculous reason to believe that you're a butterfly. Notice you're not telling me that it is impossible to doubt, or it is impossible to think that thought. It's not impossible, it's possible. But you don't have good reasons to doubt, right? All doubt is based on beliefs. And the beliefs you base your doubt on are all beliefs that can be doubted. So in some sense, we do not live in a world that is immune to doubt. We live in a world where doubt is a possibility. But that does not mean that because doubt is a possibility, it is something you should always do. Doubt can be legitimate, can be justified, or it can be illegitimate. It can be ridiculous. The same way that beliefs can be legitimate and justified, or can be ridiculous, unreasonable, right? And just because it is possible for me to believe that I am a penguin, doesn't mean that me believing I'm a penguin is a legitimate thing to do, is a justified thing to do, right? But he also goes on to say, well, the idea that you can doubt everything then is ridiculous because any doubt is based on things you believe. So in order to doubt X, you have to believe Y and Z. So when Descartes says, I'm doubting everything, well, that's impossible. You can't doubt everything because doubt is based on, and you are making arguments using your trust for your rational faculties, right? You're trusting your capacity to think and learn and understand. You're trusting your capacity to use language. You're trusting a lot of things in order to doubt the doubts that you are doubting. So you're not actually doubting Descartes. You just are attempting to use that as a method. Doubting everything might be an intellectual attitude you want to have, but actually it fails practically because our whole life is based on, and this is an important point, faith. Right? You cannot prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are not a butterfly. But you don't need to. You cannot prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that when you eat certain foods, they are going to build you up physically in a way that is meaningful. Most of us actually don't understand how it is that foods build up our body. Right? We just trust some people who said some things on Instagram probably. Right? That we should really get into kombucha or, I don't know, eat a lot of kale, right? We trust it. Has anybody here done the research themselves, right? You just ended up trusting a few people who said a few things and they kind of looked like they knew what they were talking about. They had a white coat on, and if you have a white coat on, it probably means you know what you're talking about. Now it becomes very confusing when different people with white coats say different things, right? It becomes really, so what should we do now, right? Anyway, it's not our topic. But the thing is, our whole lives are based on faith, based on trusting certain things. And I'm going to explain more what I mean by that. And this is where I'm trying to go. I'm trying to think, maybe there's a different way to think about faith that will help us navigate this mess that we have when it comes to doubt, knowledge, faith, and all these kinds of things. So, my first point is, faith is trust in something or someone. Okay? The root of the word faith, fides, in Latin, or pistis, exactly. So whether fides or pistis, they are rooted in this idea of putting your trust in something or someone. I think a great example comes this very dense and philosophical movie called Aladdin. I don't know if any of you have seen it before. Really profound philosophical movie where there's this very deep scene where Aladdin, his totally reasonable, rational magic carpet where he's flying, and he goes to Jasmine, who only met him once before in an incident that involved him stealing things, right? But he sits on this carpet and he, puts his hand out and he says, "Come ride on this magic carpet with me," which is, I don't know what you would do if somebody came in magic carpet, but he's handsome, so you know what? It's definitely a legitimate thing to do. And he just says, "Do you trust me?" Now, what is the evidence that she trusts him? Think about it. What would she say what would it mean if she said, "Oh, I really trust you, but I'm not getting on this carpet"? She doesn't trust him. Trusting someone or trusting something means you put your weight upon that which you trust. All of you came into this lecture hall and you threw your weight on the chairs. I don't know if any of you tested all the nails and bolts in the chair to make sure it's going to carry you. You thought it's a reasonable thing to do. You trusted the chair. You put your weight on the chair. Now, you practiced what we call faith. Every time you get into an elevator, you practice what we call faith. I don't know how many of you look at the last time the maintenance has been done on the elevator to make sure that it's been properly done, right? Every time you got on a plane, I don't know if you go and ask the pilot to see his ID and make sure he didn't cheat on his tests, right? You just trust it. And it's not an irrational thing to do. It's a very reasonable thing to do. You trust a lot of things. All relationships are built on trust. Now, let me tell you this. There's a very important distinction that we usually make between proof and evidence. Okay? Proof is what we can have in the field of mathematics and abstract logic. Proof means to know something with 100% certainty, right? You can show something with 100% certainty. Everything else in the world is rooted in trust that is based on evidence. Trust that is based on evidence. Evidence suggests that something is true. A lot of evidence makes the truth of something much more reliable, but it does not amount to proof. But think about it. Again, when somebody tells you something you do not want to accept, you demand proof. And when they cannot give you proof, you reject it. However, the things that you want to accept are things you accept based on evidence, not based on truth. Not based on proof. Do you understand what distinction I'm trying to make here? Okay? So what I want to suggest is that all our lives are based on trust. Trust is the foundational element, and trust is another word for faith. It is the foundational element that we use to live our lives in this world. We cannot live without trust. It is impossible to live without trust. So faith is a basic and necessary feature of life, but also of knowledge. You cannot have knowledge without faith. Do you know that? So let's think about this in relationships, right? This is a big dilemma in relationships. Relationships are based on trust, right? You can't have a relationship with someone you cannot trust. So usually what you want to do is you want to know whether that person is trustworthy or not. Okay? How do you know whether a person is trustworthy or not? Well, you have to get to know them. But I don't want to get to know them before I know whether they're trustworthy or not. I want to know whether they're trustworthy or not before I get to know them. But that's the problem. You cannot know them unless you trust them at least a little bit, enough to know them a little bit. You might go to someone else you trust and ask them about whether that person is trustworthy or not, and they can tell you, but there's also always a possibility that they're wrong, right? So you have to trust a little bit in order to know a little bit. But when you know a little bit, you trust a little bit, you can get to know more. Do you know that that is true of everything? Knowledge requires trust, but also knowledge inspires trust. So you trust someone, you get to know them. You get to know them, you can trust them more. You trust them more, you get to know them more, and it's a cycle that keeps on going. They work together. You cannot have one without the other. Even in scientific endeavors, trust is an important feature. You have to trust that your senses are telling you the truth. You have to trust that the research papers that are being done and that the things that you are reading were actually done by people who know what they're doing. And they weren't cheating. Well, you say, well, there are a lot of measures that are put in place to make sure that that's, and I agree, right? Scientific world is trying really hard to make sure that there is no fraud, that there is no problems with research, but that doesn't mean that there never were problems with research. It is trustworthy to a very high degree, but that doesn't mean that it is not based on trust. Everything in the world, whenever it comes to knowledge, trust is fundamental. Trust is important. You cannot have knowledge without trust. And you cannot have trust without knowledge. And you need them both. And this is why living in this world requires courage, because there is a sense where everything you do is something that contains some level of risk. Now, faith and doubt can be reasonable and justified, or unreasonable and unjustified. We should question our beliefs and question the reasons we doubt. So when someone says to you, I believe in X, you are justified in asking that person, well, why do you believe in X? What makes you think that X is true? And they can give you good reasons or bad reasons. If they give you bad reasons, you can tell them, well, that is not a good reason to believe that X is true. You are not justified in believing that X is true. I will not believe that X is true because you haven't given me good reasons to believe that X is true. But also in the same way, someone can tell you, I'm doubting X. You can ask them, why are you doubting X? And they can say, I'm doubting X because 1, 2, 3 reasons. And you can say, well, these are good reasons to doubt X. That means I should doubt X too. Or, well, these are very bad reasons to doubt X. If you give me bad reasons to doubt X, I will not doubt X. So your doubt can be justified or it can be unjustified. It can be reasonable or it can be unreasonable. In the same way that your faith can be reasonable or unreasonable if it is based on evidence. Faith does not claim to have answers to all questions, and it is not against mystery. But it must be built on a strong and secure foundation. Let me give you an illustration that I think helps. I have a wife whose name is Maryam. I have an almost 3-year-old son whose name is Adam. Okay? Adam does not play a role in this illustration. I just like talking about him. Okay? I love him. Anyway. So let's imagine that all of a sudden, while I'm giving this talk, Maryam, my wife, comes running in here and runs down just in the middle of this talk. It's really weird, right? It would be really weird if Maryam came running in and she's, Wassim, Wassim, Wassim. Like, yes, Maryam, she says, give me your car keys. And let's assume that I have my car keys. I don't, but let's assume that I do. This works better when I'm in Cairo, right? But you can understand, right? Let's imagine I have my car keys. She comes running in, Wassim, give me your car keys right now. Maryam's actually in Cairo right now, so it would be really weird if she came running in. I'll probably stop the talk and just figure out what's happening. But she comes in and she says, I need your car keys right now. And I say, why do you need my car keys right now? Maryam, I'm in the middle of a talk. And you see, there's all these people here. They're watching you. This is really awkward. What are you doing? And she says, Wassim, I can't explain. I need your car keys right now. Now the question is, should I give her my car keys or not? How many of you think I should? How many of you think I shouldn't? What kind of car do you have? Okay. Now, I think in order to give her my keys, I need to answer a couple of questions. Hopefully, I will have these questions answered before I give her the car keys. But the questions that I need answered are, basically, there's one question. That question is, do I trust her? Right. But to answer that question, I need to answer 3 other questions. Okay? 1. Do I believe that Maryam loves me? Because if she loves me, she wouldn't want to harm me. She wouldn't want to steal my car and run away with it. She wouldn't, she's not attempting to destroy my reputation as a speaker who doesn't get interrupted by his wife during talks, right? She loves me, right? She cares for me. 2nd, do I believe that Maryam can drive? If Maryam comes in and says, I need your car keys right now, and I know she cannot drive, I'll tell her, well, I really appreciate you asking, but I'm not going to give you my car keys. You cannot drive. But also, imagine if Mariam, hey, this is really cool because it's for the first time in my life, I'm going to incorporate Adam, my son, into this analogy. So you're witnessing history right now. So what if Adam is the one who comes in and he says, I need your car keys, right? And let's assume Adam is a 3-year-old who can drive, right? Just for the sake of the analogy. You see, Adam does not have the intellectual capacity to evaluate the situation to know that it is necessary for him to get the car keys now and not in a couple of hours. Usually when Adam, my son, wants something, he believes that he needs it now. It doesn't matter what the thing is, right? If he wants to fly across the world, and I say, well, no, he says, I say, we're going to fly later. For example, we're going on a trip. He'll say, well, no, I want to go now. There's just, now is the only legitimate time to do the thing he needs to do. He is not wise enough to be able to evaluate a situation and do or make a right decision. I'm looking for love, power, and wisdom. She loves me, she knows how to drive, she's wise enough to be able to evaluate the situation. Now, if I believe these things about my wife, I'll give her my keys. Now, this is important. Because I'll give her my keys even if I don't know why she wants them. The question is, when it comes to putting your faith in God, putting your trust in God, do you have sufficient reasons to trust that He loves you, that He's powerful, and that He's wise? Now, you might have questions about predestination, or you might have questions about Old Testament violence, or you might have questions about how science relates to faith. Legitimate questions. We give lectures all the time. We talk about these with people all the time. We spend years of our lives reading books and thinking about these topics. They're really important questions. But here's the thing. I do not have faith in God because I have all these issues sorted out. I have faith in God because I believe in Jesus Christ. God gave me enough reason to believe that He loves me. He gave me enough reason to believe that He is powerful. And He gave me enough reason to believe that He is wise, that I can give Him my life knowing that eventually I will understand some of the things I don't understand. I trust Him. I do not trust my capacity to understand everything. I trust Him. I do not trust the certainty that I have in my beliefs. I trust Him as a person, character, because He is worthy of being trusted. What it means to have faith in God. It is not irrational. It is based on reasons. And I believe it's based on good reasons. Not because I have answers to every single question I can imagine having. I promise you I have questions that are not answered. I promise you that there are things in the Bible that I don't understand. I promise you that there are parts of the Bible that I come and read and think, I don't like this. But I tell Him, I know You are good because of what I saw in Jesus Christ. Help me understand what I can't understand. I trust You. When my wife does something strange, my first reaction, if you don't explain it to me, I will leave you. That would be ridiculous. My first reaction is, help me understand what You did, because I know You enough to know that there's probably a good reason You did what You did. Can you say that you have that kind of trust of God? If we're talking about faith and trust and doubt, we have to look at Thomas' story, right? We have to look at doubting Thomas, the man who we gave the infinite or eternal reputation of being a doubter, just because he doubted once, right? I don't know if it's really fair of us to do that, but we call him Doubting Thomas for a reason. The story goes as follows, in the Gospel of John. He says, 8 days later, His disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. I think Jesus coming through locked doors is enough for me to kind of rethink my position of doubt, right? It's just but anyway. Just when He said peace, then He said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands, and put your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. Thomas answered Him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen, yet have believed. Now, this is the way most people read this passage. Thomas is a bad guy. He would not have enough faith. He demanded to see evidence. He demanded to see Jesus, which is the exact same thing that happened to all 11 other disciples, or 10 other disciples at that point, right? Jesus appeared to the disciples, but Thomas was not with them. He showed them His wounds, and they believed because they saw Him. Now, when Thomas demands the same thing, we think, Thomas, come on. You don't want to believe that a man was raised from the dead just because you didn't see him? He would be like, guys, you only believe because you did see him. Why am I a bad guy? Because I am not. I'm just demanding what happened to you, right? And we think Jesus is, the way we read this is, Thomas, come on, put your hands here if you want, if you must. You only because you see him? Well, people who believe who don't see are much better than you are, Thomas. But I don't think that's what the text is saying. Maybe let's try to read it with another tone. Maybe let's try to say, Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands and put your hand in the place in my side. Don't disbelieve, but believe. Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who believe and have not yet seen or have not seen. Now, why do I think this reading is more correct? I think this reading is more correct because of the passage that comes right after that. Right after that, we read this. John goes on to say, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Now notice, a couple of things. Jesus is not saying that blessed are those who believe and disregard their questions. That's not what he says. He doesn't say blessed are those who believe and do not use their mind. That's not what he says. He does not say blessed are those who believe and do not think reason is a good thing to use when it comes to God. That you should put your reason aside, put everything aside in order to have faith. That's not what Jesus says. Jesus is just saying that sight is only one of the kinds of things that you can have in order to believe. Some people believe because they saw, and that's not a bad thing. But a lot of people are going to believe and they have not seen. That doesn't mean they don't have evidence. It means they just have a different kind of evidence. What other kind of evidence is there? What John is basically saying is, here, I'm telling you this story that you can check. I'm telling you about Jesus. I'm telling you about what he claimed about himself. So you can look at this stuff and check for yourself and believe. The Bible always gives us reasons to believe. It gives us evidence to believe that we need to look at and evaluate. The Bible never, affirms or encourages what we call blind faith. There are some people who think faith is inherently blind. Faith is to believe things when you don't have evidence for them. But the fact that we need to put the word blind before faith in order to say that people are believing without evidence means that faith in itself is not blind. Do you understand what I'm saying? If I want to say a faith that is not based on evidence, I have to put a word before it that is blind, right? It means that faith is not inherently blind. Faith actually is based on evidence. Jesus was giving a lot of people reasons to believe that he is who he claims he is. The kind of faith God with is the faith that binds our life to him and makes us completely dependent on him. Again, I want you to think about Aladdin and Jasmine. What does it mean to have faith in God? Having faith in God does not mean you believe that he exists. And it does not mean you believe that he is powerful. You know what? James tells us in the Bible that demons believe that as well. You can't say that demons have faith in God. Faith is about putting your trust in someone or something. And when you trust someone or something, you bind yourself to that thing. Jasmine, in trusting Aladdin, binds her destiny to his. If Aladdin did not do proper maintenance to his flying carpet, Jasmine is going to crash with Aladdin. By trusting Aladdin, she binds herself to him in such a way that what is going to happen to him is going to happen to her. Every time you get in a car with one of your friends, you are putting your trust in that friend and you are tying your destiny to the destiny of your friend and that car. Right? Every time you trust someone with your money, let's say I give you $5,000 right now, I am trusting the destiny of my possession of that money to you. If you lose that money, I lose that money. That's what faith does. That's what trust does. Trust binds us to one another. And that is the kind of faith that God is looking for. He is looking for people who are going to trust him because they have enough reasons to do so, and that trust binds them to him in such a way that their destiny becomes bound with his. They are fully dependent on him. That's what it means to give your life to Christ. It means I'm giving myself to you. I'm depending on you. I'm living the life that only makes sense if you are real, if you exist, and if you are worthy of that trust. Let's go back to where we were. This is the problematic conception, right? Knowledge, beliefs that are certain, indubitable, and completely trustworthy. Faith, doubted, are subjective, and are not trustworthy. This is the common conception that I want to reject. So it's wrong. I have all these big red X's. It means that I don't accept these definitions. This is the definition I want to suggest. I want to say that knowledge are true beliefs that I am justified in holding that can be doubted. Knowledge is one of the most popular philosophical definitions of knowledge is justified true belief, right? Since Plato, that's kind of the way people have thought about knowledge. Knowledge is having beliefs that are justified and that are true. If your beliefs are justified and true, that is what counts as knowledge. But that doesn't mean they are immune to doubt. And at the same time, faith is the trust that makes knowledge possible. So you can have knowledge about God. You can have a justified faith in God. So just because something can be doubted doesn't mean that it should be doubted. Just because it is possible that we live in the matrix doesn't mean you should believe we live in the matrix. Just because it is possible that you are a butterfly dreaming to be a human being doesn't mean you should believe that. Actually, if you do believe that, probably something is wrong with you. You might need to book an appointment with someone to talk about this further. And this is, I think, the error that we get from at least interpreting Descartes the way we do. Descartes said if something can be doubted, we should doubt it. And what I want to say, no. Just because you can doubt something doesn't mean you should doubt something. You should only doubt something if you have good reason to doubt that. Well, does that mean that I have to live my entire life without any? No, it does not mean that. Because, again, philosophers distinguish between two different kinds of certainty. They talk about epistemic certainty. Now, epistemic is a very fancy word that means the kind of certainty that comes from our intellectual capacities, our knowledge capacities, right? So they talk about epistemic certainty. Everything we've been talking about so far is what we call epistemic certainty. But philosophers talk about also what we call psychological certainty. Psychological certainty is the state of having an assurance, of being comfortable in my beliefs. You do not have to live all the time in doubt just because you don't have epistemic certainty. You can have psychological certainty. And that's what I've been trying to suggest. We can have the kind of certainty that I have in giving my wife my keys. When I give her my keys, I am not sitting fretting about how terrible this is going to be. My trust in her gives me a kind of psychological certainty that allows me to be comfortable in the situation that I'm in, even if I have questions. Right? You can have doubt, you can have questions, and still be comfortable. If the right questions, the basic questions, the fundamental questions are answered. If you can trust that He is good, if you can trust that He is powerful, and if you can trust that He is wise, He loves you, you can live with questions and don't disregard them and don't suppress them, pursue them and try to get answers to them. It does not mean that you have to abandon everything because there are questions that are unanswered in your life. This is a really big quote that's saying the same thing that I'm saying right now. I'm going to give you these slides if you want to look at that a little bit more. This is just very quickly how the Bible talks about the kind of certainty that we can have. So in Hebrews, we read this, and we desire each one of you to show the same earnestness to have the full assurance of hope. In Hebrews 10, it talks about the full assurance of faith. Some translations talk about the certainty of faith or the certainty of hope. This is not an epistemic certainty. Again, it's a kind of psychological certainty rooted in having the right kind of faith, good reasons to believe that something is true. Okay, let me very quickly talk about this and I will end. Gary Habermas is a Christian philosopher and apologist. He's one of the people who worked on things like evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Very, very influential guy. He went through a very long period of doubt after he was an apologist, not before, right? So his wife got cancer and she died, and then he spent a lot of years kind of struggling with doubt after that, even though he's one of the people who had a lot of the answers. And I've met these people. I've met people who have studied the apologetics, who know the philosophy, who know the ideas, and yet they still struggled with doubt. John the Baptist in the Bible struggles with doubt. Right? He goes to Jesus and he sends his disciples to Jesus and he says, are you the one or should we wait for someone else? And Jesus does not think that's a horrible thing. He actually answers the question and he talks about John the Baptist right after that as if he were like the greatest prophet that has ever come, even though he doubted. The Bible is full of people who doubt and it's not a bad thing. Now, Gary Habermas says there are 3 kinds of doubt. So after his period of doubt, when he came out of it, he wrote a couple of books on doubt. I suggest that you read them. I think one of them is called The Thomas Factor and one of them is called Dealing with Doubt. Really good books if you are thinking about this issue. And one of the things he does is he talks there are 3 kinds of doubt. The first kind of doubt is called factual doubt. Factual doubt is doubt about facts. You have certain questions that are not answered. Having these questions not answered is bothering you. You spend some time researching. You find good answers. You are satisfied. Or you don't find good answers. You abandon your belief and you go on with your life. I get people who ask me questions sometimes. I answer the questions. They get up and they're very happy and they leave. I had someone come to me one time in tears, broken down, feeling like her faith is being lost. We talked about her questions, answered her questions. She got up, gave me a hug and left dancing because she thought, okay, I found sufficient answers. She had factual doubt. Now, the second kind of doubt, and this is the much more tricky kind of doubt, and this is why I want to close with this, it's called emotional doubt. Emotional doubt is not based on me not having answers to certain questions. It's based on certain emotional experiences that I have that lead me to not being able to trust. Okay? So what does that mean? It basically means this. It means when you go through an experience, when anyone goes through an experience, you don't just go through the experience, you interpret your experience. You tell yourself a story about the experience you went through. You interpret the experience in a certain way, and that way of interpreting that experience influences the way you feel about things in the future. So let me give you an example. Let's say you were in a car accident, right? And then you start thinking about the fact that you were in a car accident and you start interpreting what happened. Why did this happen to me? And one of the things you come to believe because of that is, I'm in this accident because God is not watching over me. God has abandoned me. Okay? And you might not be fully conscious that you're doing that, but it kind of comes up somehow that I believe I was in this accident because God abandoned me. God does not care for me. God does not love me, right? And what happens is you might forget that you did that kind of interpretive act. It might have been subconscious at some level. But now, deep down in your heart, there is a belief that is rooted in a very big experience that you've had that says, God does not love me or God has abandoned me. And even though you're not really aware of that, even though in church you sing all the songs that talk about God's love and you sing all the songs that talk about how God cares for me, deep down inside, every time you sing these songs, something doesn't feel right. Every time you come to pray, something doesn't feel right. And you start asking questions, and you start looking for objections, and you start feeling very uncomfortable with God. And no matter what kind of answers you get, they don't heal the issue. I'm still in the problem of doubt. And Gary Habermas suggests that this kind of doubt is really challenging because it needs much more deeper work to be done than just intellectual work. Let me give you a story about me personally going through something like this. So I was interested in philosophical questions when I was quite young, right? I didn't know that they were called philosophical questions at that time. I just thought about things like, why is sin sin? Like, why is right right and why is wrong wrong? Why should we do the things we do? Why are the systems that are in place the systems that are in place? So I'm in middle school and I'm asking these really annoying questions. I was a really annoying kid probably, right? And I had a lot of friends and they were much more interested in talking about PlayStation and football and all the kinds of things that normal people my age talk about. And I wasn't very interested in these kinds of things. So what happened was, many times when I was with my friends, I wanted to talk about the things that I'm interested in. So I started talking about the things I'm interested in. I started asking questions about moral philosophy. I didn't call it moral philosophy then, but I just asked questions about these things. I asked questions about God. I asked questions about the existence of God, things like that. And my friends wanted to play FIFA, right? And I was an annoyance. But I want you to notice what happened. in time, I began to realize that my friends are not interested in what I am interested in, which is a normal thing to realize, but this is what happened. I did not interpret this incident as my friends are not interested in what I'm interested in. I interpreted it as I am not interesting. Do you realize the difference? It's not they are not interested in me. I am not interesting. You know, we do this all the time. I'm in a relationship and the person stops loving me or tells me that they don't love me or whatever it is. And instead of thinking the person does not love me, I start thinking I am not lovable. And that's a very big difference, because that means it's something I'm going to take with me in every single relationship I go to. So I came to the conclusion that I am not interesting. But I never talked about things that were important to me, because if they were important to me, then they wouldn't be important to anyone else. And you know what I didn't realize happened? I stopped praying. Because God is great. I'm not interesting. He's not interested in what I have to say. Now, none of this was conscious. I still went to church. I still was part of worship. I still did all the things that you do. And if anybody were to ask me, does God love you? Yes, is God interested in you? Of course He's interested. He's interested in everybody. And I would preach it if I needed to. But deep down inside, emotionally, it just didn't work. I couldn't pray. It was too heavy on me to do. I remember that day very vividly. I was sitting in church and there was a worship leader. And she was talking and she just said a sentence. She said, every time you talk to God, His heart beats faster. Felt like someone slapped me on the face. And all of a sudden, I understood the last 2 years of my life. And all of a sudden, I realized it just made sense. And I believe that is the work of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit took truth that person spoke, and He used that truth to break a lie that was so deep inside of me. And once that lie was broken, all of a sudden I started weeping, because I realized God is interested in me. He's interested in what I have to say. I am not uninteresting. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is that it is possible that some of you have doubts that are showing up as questions, but even when you ask the questions and you get answers, the answers never, even though the answer satisfies the question, it doesn't satisfy you. And maybe a part of that is because there are deep-seated beliefs based on years of experiences that we've interpreted in certain ways that lead us to this problematic position of emotional doubt. And we need to be exposed to truth. We need to tell God, let me find these lies that are inside of me that are causing me to be in this position of doubt. And it might be a process you have to walk through, but I'm telling you, there is an end to this process. He does break truths, break lies inside of us and reveal truths to us that enable us to experience and to live the relationship He calls us to with Him. And this is why in the beginning I suggested that sometimes you need to fight with God. He is big enough. He is big enough for you to fight with Him, and He doesn't get angry at you for fighting with Him. In fact, He can see that this is your heart that's still longing for Him, still clinging to Him, still saying, I will not give you up until you bless me, until I see you, until I find you, until this relationship with you continues. Let's pray for a couple of minutes, maybe sing a song, and then I have as much time as I'm allowed to give you in Q&A.